Mackenzie Johnston with Tri-State Livestock News, bringing you discussions concerning fair cattle markets. Today we have the opportunity to chat with Kyle Arganbright of Valentine, Nebraska. He is the co-founder and executive vice president of Sandhills State Bank, and he also has a family ranch on the Nebraska-South Dakota border north of Valentine. So to start with, can you just tell me a little bit about your background and your involvement in the cattle industry?
Yeah, I live in Valentine, Nebraska. I was born and raised here. We've got a family ranch operation, little cow-calf operation on the right on the state line between Nebraska and South Dakota. And then I'm also, my day job is co-founder and executive vice president of Sandhills State Bank. So we're an ag bank with a bunch of locations throughout the Sandhills, and we were founded in 2010 primarily as a result of a decline in the number of local banks and the pressure that was putting on a lot of really good ag producers in the region. You know, when those decisions were being made in San Francisco and Minneapolis, it just kind of took a lot of that local touch out. So we filled a gap, and I'm pretty proud to be able to serve the Sandhills in the way that we do.
So what do you feel are the major issues standing in the way of fair cattle markets today? And what solutions do you think could be implemented to solve these issues?
I think the primary issue is that we continue to try to commoditize beef. So our system is trying to create a situation where high quality beef doesn't earn the premium that it should. And there's a lot of different levers and kind of, I guess, conversations that can happen within that. And a reason for that, I think, is the packer concentration. It's just crazy to me that we have such a dependency on so few firms. And if you look around other industries, when you see that type of concentration, it doesn't end well. We see that. I'm in craft brewing too. We've got a little brewery called Bolo Beer in Valentine, and it's a David and Goliath situation. There's two companies that hold like 70% of the market share there. Broadband's been an issue in Nebraska, rural Nebraska especially. There's significant concentration in that market too. Banking is and was kind of the same way. And we've had some good local banks step up, but whenever you lack the opportunity to kind of fend for yourself as a region or an industry, bad things can happen. So we've got to fight through that. We talked earlier. I'd written a column in the World Herald and gave a few ideas there. I think we can think without really taking any of this head on. We can just do what's best for cattlemen and for Nebraskans. I mean, if we work to support the establishment of additional packing plants and lockers in Nebraska, if we take ownership of some of the meat packing inspection to help make it easier to get some USDA inspected meat out the door in Nebraska, that'd be helpful. And I think, maybe we ought to think about some sort of labeling program that helps distinguish Nebraska beef from, say, Namibian beef. We need to do these things because we've got a premium product and an infrastructure that's just ripe for this. We've got excellent producers. We need to let them shine.
You just mentioned labeling. And more than ever, consumers want to know where their food comes from. Do you think mandatory country of origin labeling has a place in our cattle industry?
I think it does. The M on the cool is where all the complication comes from. Mm-hmm. That's WTO, international trade kind of stuff. But it just boggles my mind that it's difficult for us to label our beef. I want to know everything that I put in my body. In fact, it's mandated in other consumer products, yet not here. And I think the reason is because it's an acknowledgement that our product is far superior to other global options. If there were American beef next to beef from some other country, unless your brother or uncle produced it, you're going to choose American beef. And so we've got to loosen up these restrictions on labeling, and if not, enforce them a little more rigorously, because there's also some beef coming into our country from other countries.
And to what you just said, you were speaking of Namibian beef. What are your thoughts on cattle and beef imports into the United States, specifically from countries like Namibia and Brazil, who are known for their foot and mouth disease outbreaks?
It scares me. We've got to make sure we've got good controls on there. I remember traveling foreign a few times, and there's always the question, have you been to a farm? Or have you been part of any ag operation? And they make sure there's no dirt on your shoes and the whole 9 yards. I mean, so I hope we have good controls on this coming in, but I don't know. It seems like an additional risk that might be a little bit unnecessary. It's just wild to me that we have a trade deficit on cattle and beef. So we're importing more than we're exporting. When we've got the highest quality product in the world. You would think it'd be the other way. I understand there's just some price sensitivity the American consumer's got, and we've got to be able to hit that, but the math just doesn't add up to me.
What are your thoughts on this cattle market heading into 2021? Do you think we're going to gain some strength as we continue to work through the year?
I would hope so. I mean, ranchers are eternal optimists, right? Coming into even 2020, I was expecting this thing to turn over the next couple of years. If you look at just cow numbers throughout the country and knowing locally what we'd experienced over the last couple of years in the Sandhills with the blizzards and the unbelievable amounts of water that really limited some folks' carrying capacity. And in the end, we've got the highest quality product. Trump was working on exports, and I think we saw one of the highest level of exports that we've seen in the last year. If those trends continue, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. But the cattle industry is cyclical. It's a several year cycle, and people just kind of wait for those years where they can clip off some good gains and handle some deferred maintenance on their operations. So hopefully we can get those soon.
There's been a big push for plant-based and cultured created meat, especially since the pandemic hit a year ago. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's going to gain enough traction to take part of the beef market away?
I don't know. I mean, it's something we need to keep our eye on, plant-based beef. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of how efficiently they can produce it, but also, this is where some of this labeling comes in. We need to make sure that we can fully distinguish animal-based beef from plant-based beef. The number of chemicals that go into this are really concerning to me. I don't know. I'm sure there's some food scientist somewhere that stamped it, but I don't know. I don't want to eat it. There are some people that choose a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle. I don't understand it. Sometimes there's some health reasons for doing so, but I think we just need to focus on making sure our product and our industry is as healthy as possible, and that people know what they're eating and get an opportunity to do so.
Over the past few years, we've seen a significant amount of small to mid-sized producers drop out of the cattle industry. Whether they are cow-calf producers or feeders, backgrounders, you name it, our numbers have went down. With that, do you think our cattle industry is stepping closer to becoming vertically integrated?
That's a good question. Cattle industry is a capital-intensive business. It takes a lot of money to run cattle, to feed cattle, to process cattle. And so that's why I think you're seeing the number of smaller operations decline. But that's also might be kind of the barrier we need to get for someone to fully vertically integrate the entire industry. You're seeing it in niche ways, right? Like people will own an animal from start to finish and then process it themselves or through a partner for some specific branded types of beef. But I think we need to keep our eye on it because the other protein supply chains have become vertically integrated, and that's the last thing we want, particularly as folks living out in western Nebraska, which rely upon this industry to drive our communities.
So what are some of the main concerns you hear from cattle producers that you interact with there around Valentine?
Ranchers are really good about focusing on the things that they can affect. So they're really focused on taking care of their grass and making sure that they've got good genetics going into their herd and making sure that their animals are protected in extreme weather events. There's so much that they can't control, like the weather, that they focus a lot. I guess a lot of what I'm hearing is on markets. People just want to make sure that they can continue to earn a living by doing something they love, which is ranching.
How do you think President Joe Biden's administration will affect our cattle industry and agriculture overall?
That's an interesting one. I think we're going to have to take the good with the bad. My concerns are they seem to be really focused on some labor rules and really don't understand production agriculture. They are obviously very focused on environmental things, which has always been a disconnect for me because ranchers are the greatest environmentalists I know. Like their livelihood literally depends upon them taking care of their land and their environment. But, the waters of the U.S., Biden was there when that thing came in vogue and caused a few headaches. So that's, I think those are some things that I think we need to be watching out for. Some of the good I've heard, the right to repair, it seems as though they're supportive of that. I know anybody that's had to take a newer tractor to get work on appreciates the ability to still work on their old tractors. I've read some things that it sound like maybe they want to address some of the market concentration, maybe through existing methods like the Packers and Stockyards Act. Who knows? The Democrats have been into consumer protection and lean that way a lot, so I could see a path for them justifying some work there, but time will tell.
Do you have any closing statements you'd like to make?
A couple closing statements. One, here in the Great Plains, especially western Nebraska, we're really positioned well in the long run for cattle. There's always been a theory that as people continue to move from lower class to middle class in foreign countries, it's going to increase the demand for U.S. beef, and I think that still remains true. It's a little complicated getting that beef over there, but I think over time, people are going to continue to demand the highest quality product. I think, too, there's some stuff happening at state levels that we need to pay attention to. Senator Tom Brewer in Nebraska recently introduced LB 235, which is enabling a state meat inspection program. We're not going to be able to solve this thing in one fell swoop. I think we need to just chip away at it. So anytime we see something that we can support, we need to go support it. I know it takes a lot of effort to be heard, but there are some new ways, be it letters or testifying via Zoom. I think cattlemen need to speak up in these instances and make sure that we're part of the solution. There are some good conversations happening. I think we just need to continue to push them. And the last thing I'd mention too, and I don't want to be self-serving with this, but the PPP program, folks, if they are involved in production agriculture, so if they have a Schedule F on their tax returns, they're eligible for some money. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not always trying to promote everybody going and grabbing a bunch of government money, but the fact of the matter is the way this market cratered last year because of the pandemic, there are some folks that deserve this. These people need to make sure that they're reaching out to their local banks and getting the support they need.
One more question from what you just said. You mentioned the bill that Senator Brewer had brought forward for state meat inspection here in Nebraska. So what are some of the challenges standing in the way of that bill getting passed? What are the arguments against that bill?
So I was actually testifying on some broadband initiatives that day. So I caught most of this, but not all of it. It seems as though cost of administering these inspections is one thing. Another is that as soon as state inspected meat goes across state lines, it becomes an interstate product and requires all the USDA regulations. I think my perfect world would be the state would take over those USDA inspections because everybody wants safe food, right?
Yep.
And maybe we could do it in a way that was more responsive and help support the establishment of additional smaller packers and walkers. We've got a great opportunity to create some more rural jobs while providing a new marketing opportunity for some ranchers throughout the state. I think we're positioned as well as anybody to do it.